Hello and welcome to Sophie and Co. I'm Sophie Shepard-Natze. Israeli maps show its borders going all the way to the River Jordan. By international law, however, much of the Jordan's West Bank is Palestinian. Israel holds it for its own and covers it with an ever-widening net of settlements. To ensure safety, next to the settlers are always the soldiers. The IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, and its mission is what we're talking about today.
Israeli soldiers. Young, brave, patriotic, proud to defend their country. But how to deploy when there is no direct attack? Gaza border control, West Bank patrols, checkpoint inspections, watching over Palestinians. Breaking the Silence has a collection of disturbing testimonies of abuse, looting, and destruction by IDF soldiers, even when there is no danger.
And our guest today is Avichai Stoller, a member of the IDF Veterans Group Breaking the Silence. Avichai, it's great to have you with us on the program. So basically, Breaking the Silence is a community of IDF whistleblowers, right?
Yeah. Actually, I guess what we're trying to do is collect and publish stories, testimonies of soldiers who served in the occupied territories, and I guess advance some kind of debate, discourse regarding the nature of the military control over the occupied territories.
Mm-hmm. But how many are you at this moment?
Well, until today, actually more than 900 soldiers, both men and women, testified to Breaking the Silence. We're talking about soldiers that served in all possible units that serve either in the occupied territories or in positions that are relevant to the control of the occupied territories. We're talking about anywhere between, the reconnaissance and commando units and all the way to, logistic soldiers or soldiers that serve in less direct positions.
Mm-hmm. How anonymous or exposed is participation in Breaking the Silence?
Most of the soldiers that testify remain anonymous. Speaking out when it comes to the reality as a soldier in the occupied territory is something that society, in a sense, sanctions. I mean, Israelis see the military and definitely the soldiers as somehow, I don't want to say holy, but they definitely love them, and you can understand it, maybe even justify it. But for them, even though it's the soldiers themselves who are speaking out against the reality, not against other soldiers, the fact that it might sound like criticism against the military is something that for a lot of Israelis is very hard to receive. And then again, like I said, the responses of families, of friends vary. For a lot of people, immediately they see you as some kind of traitor or snitch, and that you're saying things that somehow should be, as the saying goes, that the laundry you need to do inside the house and not take it out.
But Avichai, what about yourself personally? I mean, you're out in the open. What has been the reaction of people around you, of your family, your friends, your neighbors? What do they say to you?
Well, I guess that's a sensitive point when we're talking about me personally. Well, when it comes to my friends, for example, I guess the people that I grew up with, maybe even some of the people that served with me, then my friends are actually quite open. Quite a few of them, for example, came with me or one of my colleagues to see the reality. I mean, we guide tours to the occupied territories, and that affected their opinion dramatically. We're talking about a lot of people that didn't really know the reality before they heard it either from my own stories or from other soldiers. When it comes to my family, for example, for my parents, I have to say that it's still very hard for them. Mm-hmm. I mean, in a sense, I think that my family is a very typical Israeli family. I mean, they're not religious or anything like that. I mean, really typical in Israeli standards, liberal, left-wing, but they're still Israelis, still Zionist Israelis. And for them, hearing me speak, saying supposedly bad things about my military service is something that is very hard for them to contain. It's in many ways a part of their identity, it's a society of soldiers in a sense.
Mm-hmm. Now, your website is filled with accounts of abuse in the Palestinian territories by Israeli forces. What has been your personal experience? What have you seen there?
Actually, 2 days after we reached active duty, I served in the area of the city of Hebron, in the southern area of the West Bank. And 2 days after that I reached this area in July 2002, there was an attack. A settler's family was killed by Palestinian gunmen, and our unit was basically ordered to close down the town from which the gunmen came from, a town called Yatta. The problem was that we were a very small unit, maybe 50 soldiers, and the town of Yatta is home to maybe 70 or 80,000 Palestinians. So imposing effective curfew on this town with 50 soldiers in the first place was basically impossible. So what did we do? We drove inside town, we stopped in the center of town, jumping out of the jeeps for the first time, starting to shoot in the air, throwing stun grenades, tear gas canisters, closing down all the shops in more or less 2 streets. In those 2 streets, it was complete curfew. We closed down all the shops, nobody was allowed to go. We were shooting in the air, basically trying to make sure that everybody knows that the IDF is in town. Now, once the children started coming, Palestinian children started coming, throwing stones at us, that basically gave us the excuse to retaliate. So we started shooting rubber-coated bullets, which are basically pieces of metal covered at the children. Mostly rubber bullets, tear gas canisters, basically everything that we had. Now, after some time, one of our commanders came to us and told us that he saw a child dancing on one of the rooftops. So he aimed his gun at the child, but the child wouldn't move. So he shot him with a rubber bullet. Again, I'm repeating it, rubber bullets are only covered with rubber. Basically, they are pieces of metal. And then he saw the child drop on the floor. And then he got a bit nervous. He said, maybe I killed the child, and then maybe I'll get in trouble with the military police. But after a minute, he saw the child getting up, holding his stomach in pain, and then he calmed down, saying, maybe I didn't kill him, I only injured him, so I'll be okay. And he was okay. And to be honest, all of us found this story very amusing. And that was the routine for a couple of weeks. After a couple of weeks, I don't know, the general commander of the West Bank stops in the center of town next to the commander of our unit. They open the maps for maybe 5 seconds, and that was it. We go back to the jeeps, go back to the military vehicles, and drive back to the base. We didn't arrest anybody, we didn't catch anybody, there wasn't even effective curfew, we only closed down like 2 streets, and we didn't really understand what we were doing there in the first place.
But can I ask
afterwards, we realized, because we kept on the, sorry.
Go ahead.
That afterwards we would go back and do the same type of missions to go inside a Palestinian town just to make our presence heard, just to make our presence felt. We were told that that is the mission, to make sure that the Palestinians as a whole, not just the gunmen, everybody in town knows that the military is there and that they are terrified. That's how they said it in the briefing, to create a feeling of uncertainty among the Palestinian population. And I have to say to tell you now that after interviewing 900 soldiers, that was not the story of just my unit. That's a story that characterizes the nature of the military activity in the occupied territories.
So that was the actual order that the military gave you and your unit? To keep the Palestinian citizens in terror, basically.
Yes, it's called to show your presence. It has various names. High intensity patrol, a happy holiday. Every unit has its own name. The bottom line is the same bottom line. And in the briefing pages, when they brief you before the missions, they give you more or less the same orders to create a feeling of uncertainty among the Palestinian population.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the girls on the website said she was hoping to bring a touch of humanity to her service, but instead she turned into a monster. Is it so inevitable?
I guess it is. That's the thing. You send 19-year-olds, 18-year-olds to control millions of people through the barrel of the gun. Most of us untrained. I have to say that, for example, I was trained for 8 months before I was sent to active duty for the first time. Out of these 8 months, 7 months and 3 weeks had nothing to do with what I was doing in the remaining of my service. I was trained as an infantry soldier to fight another army, and this is the case for most soldiers. So you get there to the West Bank or to around the Gaza Strip, unprepared to deal with civilians, unprepared to control civilians. The only thing that you are fed with is fear and hate, and you are constantly told, be careful of the Palestinians. If you turn your back to them, they will stab you in the back. You are told, when I got to the West Bank, I was told that we need to show the Palestinians that there is a new sheriff in town. I'm quoting here, new sheriff in town. So that's how it looks like, you know, because the Palestinians are not equal. You're not a police officer, you're a soldier who's controlling through his gun, you know, millions of people. Unfortunately, that would be the outcomes of it.
Now, your organization, how long has it been around? And have you seen any results? Because for the moment, Breaking the Silence looks rather like a confession community for soldiers willing to clear their conscience from the sins of their military past, right? It's not really like a political or social force yet.
First of all, we've been around since 2004. Actually, Breaking the Silence started as a photo exhibit of soldiers that were discharged and decided to somehow bring the reality of their service to the Israeli public. So they did an exhibit in Tel Aviv. But during the exhibit, people were coming to them saying, we didn't serve in the same unit, we didn't serve in the same region, but we also have stories that we believe that the public needs to hear. So actually, for the past 9 years, that's our main project, you know, bringing those stories to the public. Now, regarding the effects, that's a hard question, because when it comes to any type of, I guess, social or political campaign, I guess quantifying the extent of your success is a very hard thing to do. You know, you never know who you affected and how you affected. To say that Breaking the Silence would be the sole organization or body that would end the occupation, probably not. We are a part of a bigger thing, a part of a bigger movement, you know, that is trying to change the reality that has been on the ground for the past more than 45 years now. But we believe that we do have a big contribution, and that when it comes to making more and more people aware of something which is somehow left outside of the discussion, and that what is actually happening on the ground. You know, everybody is talking about the peace negotiations, about, I don't know, Abbas and Netanyahu walking in suits in, you know, air-conditioned rooms in Camp David and Geneva, when in reality most people have no idea about what's happening in Kalandia or Hawara, you know, the checkpoints in the West Bank. And we believe that that's definitely our contribution to the debate, to the discussion. And when it comes to this, we did succeed in somehow getting this, I guess, deeper in the discourse.
Time for a short break now, but we will be back soon to explore what it takes for both Palestinians and Israelis to live side by side, and how should the Israeli army change, if at all. Don't go away.
Does the media lead us or we lead the media?
Privacy versus security. All right, your party, where's it going?
The questions that no one is asking with the guests that you deserve answers from. It's all on Politicking, only on RT.
Choose your language.
Good morning from me, Kevin Owen.
Bienvenidos a nuestra edición semanal.
Choose the news that concerns you. Choose the opinions that invigorate your mind. Choose the stories that impact your life. Choose the access to your RT.
Do we speak your language? Want news, programs and documentaries in Arabic? It's all here on RT. Reporting from the world's hotspots, VIP interviews, intriguing stories. Are you here? Then try RT Arabic. To find out more, visit arabic.rt.com.
Welcome back. We're talking to Avihai Stoller, a member of the IDF veterans group Breaking the Silence, which documents evidence of Israeli army abuse against Palestinians. Now, Avihai, if you ask Israeli person, most of them will tell you that Palestinians are terrorists. Now, you've been there. How many of the Palestinians are terrorists?
Definitely the fringe of the fringe. And when we're talking about the gap between what Israelis think, and not just Israelis, unfortunately, what a lot of people think when it comes to what's happening on the ground in the West Bank and what is actually happening, there is a huge gap. Most of the people, when you're talking about the Palestinians, are obviously people like everybody else who are just trying to live a normal life, but they are themselves targets of the military apparatus. In a sense, if I can point out one of our, I guess, most major publications, that's our book. You can, by the way, find it now on Amazon and anywhere else. It's called Our Harsh Logic. We try to focus on the nature of the military and try and understand what is actually the mission of the soldiers on the ground. And in many ways, you know, fighting terrorism is only a small portion of it. Obviously, soldiers are trying to prevent attacks on Israeli targets. But in a sense, what the military's main mission is controlling the occupied territories and controlling the Palestinian people. Most of the missions that soldiers are sent to under the pretext of terrorism prevention are in many ways targeting the civilians that have nothing to do with actual attacks against Israeli targets. For example, the fact that the military is practicing at any given moment in Palestinian towns, on Palestinian people, you know, doing false arrests, which is basically like a normal arrest, that you actually drag somebody out of his house in the middle of the night. The only difference is that the person that you are arresting is not really wanted for anything. This is just for practice, for training the soldiers. Now, obviously, one of the reasons that it's being done is in order to actually train the soldiers, which is problematic by itself. But I would say that if you look at the whole, at the testimonies of hundreds of soldiers, you will see that the main mission around this is to deter the Palestinian society as a whole, not just the gunmen, men, women, and children. Everybody needs to be afraid of you because that creates effective control over the Palestinian population. Today, 20 years ago, and unfortunately, if the reality continues, you know, 10 years from now.
Do you believe Palestinians should be given the right to a state?
Of course. I think this is only. I mean, I can only expect and hope that Palestinians would have the same rights like I do. Now, we in Breaking the Silence, and even I personally, I don't know what, you know, the best tangible solution is, you know, 1 state, 2 states, 3 states, I don't know. What I do know is that a reality of military occupation, a reality in which, you know, Israelis control Palestinians for decades, you know, through the barrel of the gun, is immoral and not right. And by the way, is detrimental for the Israeli state as, you know, as a democracy. Now, if the best solution, or if the only solution is providing Palestinians the right to have, I guess, the same liberties as Israelis, to me, obviously that's what needs to be done, you know?
So recently we were speaking to Israel's Deputy Foreign Minister Zev Elkin, and when we told him about you, about Breaking the Silence and your stories, what he told us in return was that Israelis, innocent Israelis, are getting killed and kidnapped by Palestinians all the time, and that also Palestinians can freely enter Israeli settlements in the West Bank versus the settlers cannot go to Palestinian villages because they can get hurt. How much truth is it in this statement?
First of all, this statement is outrageous and ridiculous because the bottom line is that Palestinians cannot enter settlements unless they work there and then their employer takes them, I guess, to the farm or anywhere else or to the construction site in which they work. Otherwise, they cannot enter the settlement, they cannot enter the state of Israel, and in some places they can't even get on the road which is being used by the settlers to move around. There is a complete system of separation in which the military, and I guess the state of Israel, is trying to separate Israelis from Palestinians, almost always on the expense of the Palestinians. To claim that Palestinians can go freely into settlements is a ridiculous claim. I invite our viewers to visit the city of Hebron, in which, in order to create some kind of buffer zone, sterile area around the settlement in the heart of the biggest Palestinian city in the West Bank. More than 15,000 Palestinians were pushed out of their houses, and the center of the Palestinian city became a ghost town, just to create some kind of empty buffer zone around the settlement. So no, Palestinians cannot enter settlements. Now, the fact that Israelis got killed in the last 10 or 20 years, obviously much more Palestinians got killed, but it doesn't change the basic fact here that the reality of occupation existed 10 years ago and 20 years ago and 40 years ago, and in this reality, both sides suffer, both Israelis and Palestinians. If we want to have people not getting killed over this debate over this conflict anymore, we need to end the occupation. That would be the best solution for both sides here.
Should the West Bank settlements be dismantled?
Again, I don't know. You're going into specifics that I honestly don't know. The only thing is that I know here is what it means to be an occupier. If people decide that they want to have, one state in which the settlements and Palestinian villages and everything stays in one country, it's up to the governments and leadership to decide. What people need to understand that the ongoing reality in which you have 500,000 Israelis living inside the West Bank and the surrounding Palestinian population around them is under military occupation is not tangible and immoral. That's the only thing that I know.
But are there any settlers within your ranks in breaking the silence, I mean?
Yeah. Even within the 900 soldiers that testify to breaking the silence, you will also find people who live east of the Green Line.
But
they have their own
say?
reasons. I mean, some of them well, among the people that testify to breaking the silence, you'll find very interesting people. Some of them are coming, I guess, from the ideological understanding that exposing the reality of occupation is essential in, I guess, taking the step forward to ending the conflict. But some people are doing it for other reasons. Some of them are doing it for personal reasons. For example, they have bad conscience about their personal actions or about actions that they witnessed. And then for them, it's not even a political issue. They're saying that it's a human issue. And for them, they just want to get it off their chest in a way. For others, it's about transparency. They're saying, I live in, for example, in a settlement. Maybe I'm not even an anti-occupation activist. But I believe in transparency. I don't see any problem with what I did in my service. And therefore, I believe that it is completely okay that the public would know about this. That's a part of this gap that I mentioned, that the soldiers are doing everything that they're doing without even knowing that, in a sense, they're doing their dirty job for the Israeli government. That afterwards, if this makes headlines in the Israeli media and definitely in the international media, the military spokesperson or the government would deny the even existence of these actions and missions. They will say, no, it never happened. When the soldiers are on the ground and they are given the briefings, nobody is telling them, be quiet about this, don't tell anybody about this because this is illegal or immoral. No, they think that everything that they're doing is essential for Israeli security. Afterwards, when it gets to the PR people of the government, then it's a different story.
So with all this abuse you're whistleblowing on, how is it possible to actually counterbalance the already deep hurt and hostile attitude to the Israelis by the Palestinians? You can't just ignore years and years of humiliation, right?
Well, the thing is that most Israelis receive their information from the mainstream media. And unfortunately, the mainstream media is not that interested in exposing the systemic nature of what I'm talking about. When, for example, a story about, the abuse of a Palestinian makes it to the Israeli mainstream media, usually it will be framed as a rotten apple, as an exception, and then immediately the military will say, the soldier who did it or the soldiers who did it would be court-martialed, and, and that we have the most moral army in the world. And then, when Israelis hear it, and that is the framing, they say, well, such a complex reality, the fact that we still have an effective military police, the fact that we're still trying, to deal with those rotten apples, with those fringes, with those exceptions, does not necessarily reflect on the system. And I think that is the gap where breaking the silence comes in. We're saying, no. First of all, this abusive nature is systemic. And it's definitely not the rotten apples, because if these are the rotten apples, then we're all rotten apples.
Well, could the IDF strategy, the way you describe it, be serving completely opposite goals and incite people to stand up against it and even take up arms and engaging in terror?
Well, I don't know. Again, I'm not trying to legitimize any type of violence, not on the side of the Israeli soldiers, not on the side of Palestinian gunmen. I mean, the only thing that I do know is, again, we cannot expect to have, you know, normal, tangible, quiet, peaceful democracy when we deny it from others. I mean, if this is the cause or this is not the cause of Palestinian violence, again, for me, this is not even the issue. I'm trying to explain Israelis how the reality of occupation is not only not about their security, it's counterproductive for their security.
Avichai, if you were in command of the IDF, what would you do differently?
That's the thing. This is not about making the army better. This is not about repairing the military. That's the thing. In a sense, the reason why Breaking the Silence is coming with those stories to the public and not to the military, as a lot of people scrutinize us for, saying, you know, you should take those stories to the military, not to the public. We're saying we have no illusions in regards to this. We don't think that you can educate a 19-year-old to be a moral occupier. First of all, because there is no such thing as a moral occupier. And second, because again, if you look again to point again to our book or to our conclusions in regards to the nature of the military mission, when the military mission is to control the Palestinian people, then obviously there is no way to correct it from within the system. This is a political decision. This is a public decision in a democracy, because in a democracy, the public has the ability to decide what would be the government and the military's mission, in a sense. You know, are we going to continue controlling the Palestinian people or not? This is not about, you know, being a general. This question, in a sense, should be, if I was, I guess, the prime minister.
Thank you so much for this interview. This was Avichai Stoller of the IDF Veterans Group Breaking the Silence. That's it for today's edition. We will see you in the next program here on Sophie Co.